Hi everyone, welcome back to Aaron's collection. This week I thought we'd do a very quick video on some of the top decks in format, especially because two of the championships are right around the corner here in Southeast Asia. We have Singapore Championships, which is pretty much this coming weekend, and the following weekend is going to be the Philippines Championship. So these are essentially the nationals of the countries in Southeast Asia. As I mentioned before, the last country among the three that are playing English language cards is Malaysia, which is my home country. That's not until end of June, which is a little awkward. Not sure why that is, but we have two national championships coming up in the next couple of weeks, so lots of Pokemon to get into. But I wanted to cover, basically my top five picks for this weekend and the next weekend. These are all still based on the current format up until Temporal Forces, so no new cards yet out of SV6, so in a sense we do have the same format that we've been playing for the past couple of weeks and months, which may or may not be a good thing depending on where you're playing right now. If you're really keen on some of the newer cards, you might be a little disappointed with this video, but I hope you can take some insights from this very quick top 5 video that I'm doing for folks that are playing in both Singapore as well as in the Philippines. Now, the first deck you see in front of you here is not really in my top 5, but I thought it's interesting enough to include in the top 5. This is Arceus in a very interesting setup. I personally call it Control Arceus or Arceus Control, but some folks have called it different names. Some have called it Arceus Radiant Charizard. Not sure which is the right terminology here, but personally I call it Arceus Control, right? Arceus Control. And this is a very interesting take on what is my favorite V-Star Pokemon. And it's basically just Arceus with Bibarel and runs Radiant Charizard and also a Fluttermane. So there are a lot of different key pieces here. Personally, I have not had a lot of experience with this deck. Let's be honest, I want to be completely clear. But I think it's interesting. I've not seen this played in my local meta game. I'm sure some folks have been playing it. This is a very interesting deck overall. You get the ability Starbirth, as always, the best Visa power, I would say. Getting you 2 cards, perfect for using a consistency booster like that for different matchups you might face, right? It also has the Bibarel engine, which is awesome because Industrial Incisors gets you lots of cards when you need it. Runs a Scorvet, which should never cut. Nestash is seriously overpowered. Those in my local game store would know. Scorvet to 1 is an awesome thing that I've managed to pull off multiple times. Runs a Radiant Charizard, so that's your single price attacker when it needs to be. Also has a Fluttermane. Now, Fluttermane here is interesting because personally I've not gotten full use out of it. I've been trying to use it here and there, but I like the utility it gives you, and because you're already playing double turbo energy, getting it powered up in 2 turns is not impossible, right? There's also lots of cards here in the deck, which makes it very interesting to use, especially because you run something like Technical Machine Devolution, so that 2 damage counters that you place does come in handy as and when. So the other thing about this list that I really enjoy is the fact that it also runs Airy, or Eerie, however you pronounce it. I really like this card in decks that can run Arceus because it gives you a strong play against decks like Chien-Pao or even against Lost Box when they least expect it, alright? And you run 2 of them, which is great. And you still run the Palpat in this list. So I didn't get to mention, this list is actually run by quite a few folks. The most recent being Jan Schaefer, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, who placed 15th at the Stockholm Regionals this past weekend. And overall, I think if you have not really tried this deck, to give it a go, but don't really expect you to do, awesomely right away, because there's a lot of intricate parts of this deck, right? There's even a couple of Grabber here, which is a very control-based card, but a card that I like to see in the format. But overall, I'm just glad to see an Arceus deck do decently, I want to say. So take it as what you might, right? Moving on to the second deck, this is Giratina. And if you have been following the results from Southeast Asia, you'd know that Lost Zone Giratina is a strong deck in our region, in the format that we're in. So we're playing best of 1 Swiss, right? And it's a it's a deck that's been winning events left, right, center ever since a version of Lozon Giratina took first place at Regional League number 2 in Malaysia. That's piloted by Aaron Kang. But this list over here is a list by the first place for the Regional League Volume 3 from Singapore. So Brian Kwa played this list. And also the same list that Gerard Ng played as well at EUIC. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this deck because I don't really have an affinity for Lozon decks personally. But the sheer power of this deck is not to be trifled with, right? Like, if you look at the list overall, there is utility here, there is control, there is an ability to get ahead. The one card that I feel that is missing from this list, and I'm sure both Brian and Gerard knows exactly why they don't have it here, Roxanne, right? They do have the one Iono, but I personally have, I'm leaning towards Lozon decks that play Roxanne for some reason. Maybe it's something of a preference call when I play the deck, although I won't say that I'm a good player by all means for the Lozon deck. Is an archetype which has a lot of pieces going for it. Now, the one thing that's interesting about this list that I really want to call out is the inclusion of Raikou V as well as Iron Hands EX. Almost as if you're playing Giratina, but with a Lost Zone box package attached to it. Now, if you watched my recent video where I interviewed Sky and Rian Famaran from in the Philippines, Sky's number one pick, if it's not Charizard, is actually Lost Box. But the issue about Lost Box is that in our best of one format, it doesn't really close games quickly, right? So what better way to close games quickly with the whole Lost Box concept than to put it into a Giratina V-Star package? You keep the utility and the early pressure that Raikou can bring, that Iron Hands can bring, and surround it with the sheer power of Giratina V-Star, which I think is an awesome concept, right? So I think this is something you should try if you're a Lost Zone aficionado, someone that's willing to try something for Lost Zone but want a little bit of spice. Try this out. I think you will not be disappointed. So that's my number 4 pick for the current format. Now, number 3 on my list is Chien-Pao Excalibur. And the first thing you might notice about this deck is that look at the list at the bottom about who have been playing this deck. There's a lot of great names who have chosen to pilot this deck, and some multiple times, right? Reggie Law, Gran Shen, John Eng, so many different awesome players that have been playing this deck. This exact list, right? And I would immediately say that Chien-Pao Excalibur is a deck that requires a lot of experience and a lot of skill to pilot. It is not an easy deck to play. But when piloted well, when played well, the deck can convert. And it's been seen in Malaysia, particularly quite commonly in a couple of regional leagues now, ever since the rotation happened. Not rotation, but ever since we're released, but also recently when we talk about the events that have been played in Southeast Asia. I think it's a very strong list overall. One of the key players with Chien-Pao is Joey Ho. So shout out to Joey, who won Regional League number 2 or number 1, I want to say, in Singapore with Chien-Pao, and I did interview him as well. So if you want to get a Chien-Pao masterclass, check out the video with Joey. Overall, I don't have a particular preference about this list. I would just pick it up as it is and play it because it's been tried and tested by the pros, by the great players of the game. I would just say if you're looking to play Chien-Pao, get as many reps as you can in it, because the deck has a very high skill cap, right? And overall, the sheer power that it gives you does become a big payoff, because it has so much of utility as well. Being able to run Reading Greninja with the Cancer Cologne play, you can take extra prizes with Iron Hands, you can close out matches, in multiple ways. Chien-Pao, brilliant card, consistency in itself, and able to one-shot anything in the format. This is a deck that, rewind time 10-15 years, I would love to take this deck for tournaments, but I'm retired from all this and I can't, my brain just won't be able to work in those high pressure situations. And I think overall, if you're getting into the game right now, this is a deck that can take you far. Keep playing it over and over, get the reps in, and it will hopefully repay itself, right? So that's my number 3 pick, Chien-Pao EX. Number 2 on my list is Ancient Box. So this is a deck that I have been playing a lot personally on PCGL and built the real deck, but I've not really taken it to my local game store. But I really enjoy playing this deck because it's just a very straightforward deck in a way. It runs only single prizes. Most of the cards are from Temporal Forces. Look at the attacker line. this deck list in particular was used to win the first place at Indonesia Regional League Volume 3 by my friend Christian. So shout out Christian for doing awesome at that event. I was so surprised that this deck did so well, but maybe I should not have, because Christian being a great player, and number two, the deck has a lot of power attached to it, right? The only difference here about this list that I have personally seen people do is cut the third counter catcher for one boss order, which is what I prefer. But I can see why 3 counter catcher makes sense as well. Most of the time with this deck, you're falling behind, right? You're gonna fall behind, and those counter catchers essentially become free boss orders, especially because you really want to be hitting Professor Seda's Vitality early, and if not, then Explorer's Guidance to get the cards you need and boost your damage output for the Roaring Moon. There is not a lot of things I would change to this list other than the boss to counter catcher to boss. Overall, you go a few ways. Some folks have cut an Ultra Ball for a second superior energy retrieval, which I personally like as well, but I won't prescribe it because I think 4 Ultra Ball is great too. I do like the 2 fighting energy because it makes hitting Primordial Beatdown much easier. You would hate to price your single fighting energy, but it also means that you take an auto loss to Neuven, which is weird because there's not really a lot of Neuven being played, but when you do face it, it's pretty much GG because you can't use Shred, and because of that, you are completely locked out from doing any damage to the deck running Neuven, right? But overall, I think this is a very strong deck. It has ability to hit 1 KOs very early if you get the cards right. It does run into some consistency problems. I faced that as well. I know it's been shown on streams. I think overall, it's a very beginner-friendly deck in some way. I think in terms of cost, it's quite cheap as well. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get it. So I feel very strongly that having a deck of this power level being accessible to newer players is always great. So if you're brand new, you want to start the game, you want to play over the coming 2 weekends at your championships, but you don't know what to get, and you don't really want to spend too much money, I would say go for Ancient Box. It's a budget-friendly deck. Most of these cards have it's been around for a while. The attackers are really cheap. You can get it for 50 cents to $1. And overall, I do think it has what it takes to win events, right? So that's my second pick. It's Ancient Box. Coming to my number 1 pick, and surprise, surprise, it's Charizard Pidgeot, which arguably is the best deck in format. I had a very, very awesome video done with Rian Famaran and Sky Mendoza, which was released just last week, so check that out if you want to, where I interviewed them as they were the 2 most recent winners with Charizard. Rian won Regional League Volume 2 Philippines, Sky won Regional League Volume 3 in the Philippines. And they went through the list really thoroughly and gave us a masterclass for Charizard, which is what I love to do on this channel. So go check that out. Now, this list here in particular was played by both Ferris and Sammy Sekum of the UK at the Stockholm Regionals, and they played pretty well, 8th and 34th. Those of you who have been in the game for very long, like I have, definitely recognize these names. These are top players from way back, legends of the game at that point, and I think this list overall has a lot of strength to it. It's consistent. I don't see a particular space here that I would change personally. That said, I have not played Charizard very often, as much as I would have loved to play, because I've been having a good time with Ancient Box. But at the same time, look at this list. It's pretty much a strong basis point for when you are looking to enjoy Charizard, right? There is the Charizard, there's Pidgeot, there's Bibarel. So this is the Thought engine essentially, popularized by Todd Reclev, having both Pidgeot and Bibarel. There's also a Cleffa here, which gets you some very cheeky draws early because as Charizard, you are usually okay with falling behind. Of course, your Rotom and Luminion, both of which are super strong. I know some prefer to cut one or the other. I personally run both in my list, which is not very far off from this list, to be honest. The one thing that I want to point out though is the fact that the list here runs 3 boss order and 1 counter catcher. I have swapped that a little bit to go with double counter catcher and 2 boss. Personally, because I feel that you are most likely going to give up a prize very early. You are likely retreating to the Cleffa and letting the Cleffa just get knocked out, and that activates counter catcher very early. That said, very likely, there are reasons for it. This, of course, is a list in a best of 3 environment, so perhaps it's not that, it comes as a situation where you may feel more comfortable having the full boss order rather than a counter catcher. I think it's a preference call. In a best of 1 format, I think double counter catcher makes sense personally. The other thing as well is only having 1 stadium, which is not wrong, I don't think. 1 collapse stadium is that go-to stadium. I have tinkered with having Lost City in here as well in the matchups that I feel really strongly about as being, like, for example, in the Chien-Pao matchup, having Collapse Stadium to just get rid, sorry, not Collapse Stadium, having Lost City to just get rid of Great Ninja saves you from having to face a Great Moonlight Shuriken twice in case you don't get the mana fee out. But it's a niche case, I have an affinity for Lost City, so maybe that's why. But overall, this is a great list to play. I shouldn't even be saying you should change anything because these are piloted by great players. But take a pick and add a personal touch, right? It's also interesting to see that they have set on what I think to be the 2 strongest tools, Maximum Belt and Choice Belt. Some folks have changed out the Maximum Belt for a Prime Catcher, and that just means that they might want to run either Vitality Band or even the other one with the Vengeance Band, I think. So you can go a few ways, right? These are some of the spots that you could add your personal flair to, and it's completely up to you, right? So this brings us to the end of the video. For me personally, I think it's an awesome time to be playing Pokemon TCG. We're coming towards the tail end of this SV5 format up to Temporal Forces, and the new set is going to come right in. There's been a pre-release, of course, for the new set, and I think it's going to be a good time to segue into the new format once NAIC comes around. But at least the next couple of weekends, it's still the same format, especially here in Southeast Asia. So tune in to the streams. I hope there will be, and I think there will be streams for the event. I'm not personally there. I won't be casting either of these events, but I hope you'd be tuning in and following the coverage here in Southeast Asia. So that's just me for the video from Marin's Collection. Nice catching up with all of you once again, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think I should have swapped out from my top 5, right? And I'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya!